Dr. Rajin Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to take a call on this bill. And it's been interesting listening to the committee stages and then the third reading today on this particular bill. And I wanted to reflect on some of the comments that have been made. I was interested in Trevor Mallard's comments earlier on in the evening or late in the afternoon when he said there are some provisions that come before the House that actually does reflect the essential differences that we do have with members opposite. And this is certainly one of them. And when we begin to look at fairness and equity, then we can see why there are some of the provisions in this bill that we oppose strongly. If we were to follow what Mr. Gilmore was saying, he's arguing that, look, we've spent all of our time talking about what is effectively the last substantial clause in the bill, and much of our time has been spent on that. He seems to be saying that no matter what the size of a bill, if there is an important clause in that particular bill that you don't agree with, you must still pass the bill. That was the kind of shallow thinking that Aaron Gilmore had, and he was advising this side of the House to take that view. Again, also from Mr. Bennett, who I wonder whether he had read the bill fully or what the point he was trying to make, but he really did believe that this side of the House does not have the best interests of the community at heart. I mean, he actually believes that, and that's the kind of amazing contribution that we heard from that particular member. Then we had a contribution from the ACT Party. And again, it began to make a link, a very non-existent link, between taxation in Britain, the unrest in the Middle East, and the development of Asia Pacific. His argument went something like Britain's troubles, of course, because of this high taxation and the differences that creates. Then he went to the Middle East and talked about the unrest there, and he talked about the kind of society that was and blamed it on the kinds of things we're debating here. And then he came amazingly to the two, I guess he was referring to the two Asian giants that produce amazing developments at the moment, amazing growth rates. What that member should also reflect on, that it's a fact that those two countries put together probably have 1 billion people in poverty. And so when this side talks about, the member has been to those countries, and that's an absolute fact. Now, but when this side of the House talks in the New Zealand context about fairness and equity, then those things do become important. So William Seo, my colleague, talked about a hospital pass, and it was the nature of this bill was also a hospital pass. And it did have quite a lot of truth to what this does and how in the last clause of the bill is introduced this major change, which is another tax bill. And the nature of that is quite fundamental in a bill of this nature. When you take a remedial matters bill of this kind, and this point has also been made, and you debate it, generally they are non-controversial. And generally there's broad agreement across the House. But this was not a bill like that, Mr. Speaker. There was a major controversial element introduced to it. Minister Dunn tried to make light of that. But you can't make light of that when it is a serious provision that needs to be debated fully. And with this side, and it's quite sad really, when this side of the House actually supports all of the other provisions in the bill, everything but one clause. I mean, tax secrecy, privacy framework, tax pooling, changes to donee status, all of those this side of the House supports. But what we have been reduced to do is to actually debate this particular bill. And it's also interesting, Mr. Speaker, to follow the argument that the other side has proposed. This particular provision is justified by the government because of those two elements. It raises only $1.5 billion a year and costs half that amount to administer. And there is a cost of 70 million, a compliance cost. Therefore, this does not work. Therefore, it has to go. But that is deliberately disingenuous, because gift duty actually exists to prevent tax avoidance and structuring. That's what it's there for. Scrapping gift duty actually opens the way to tax avoidance and structuring. So therefore, if we take those characteristics, the provision has actually been quite successful. The measure was never how much tax was going to be taken or how much it's going to cost to actually administer that. The measure was that it was an important pillar to avoid tax avoidance and structuring. And that point was made, Mr. Speaker, very strongly by the New Zealand Institute of Chartered Accountants. And I know Minister Williamson believes, of course they would, because it's self-interest. Well, I give them quite a bit more credit than the Minister does, because the Minister himself will support this particular group in terms of their quality in bringing submissions before our select committees. So I take this one quite seriously. And they raise major tax avoidance. They identify major tax avoidance opportunities that this provision will do. And the House, Mr. Speaker, the House has heard them all. But at this final stage, still worth repeating, the ability to split income with people on lower incomes. That's very interesting, because Minister Dunn is interested in income splitting. His National Party colleagues are not. So whether it is a backdoor way of bringing it in may be a lovely Freudian kind of explanation for why the Minister supports it. But ability to transfer income to loss-making entities, everybody's talked about it. It still is a problem. Simply taking it away in this way does not solve those problems. Ability to transfer assets in order to meet minimum thresholds for the financial arrangement rules and foreign investment fund rules. Ability for someone with a tax liability to divest themselves of the means to pay tax. And those kinds of points have been well made, Mr. Speaker. So what I like in this particular provision too is this. We put a fence at the top of a hill, of unstable ground, so that people will not play there and fall in, and so that particular fence does its work. But because nobody has fallen over and died, we should take that fence away, which is how I liken this particular provision in this provision in this bill, and which is why we cannot support this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there were other important contributions made. I was fascinated by Leanne Dalziel's passionate, and she spent about 4 or 5 calls on this, interrogation of the regulatory impact statement. Actually, it told us a lot about what those whose job it is to tell this House what those impacts are. And she went through it in some detail and made an important contribution. But, Mr. Speaker, there is a question in my mind now. I know Aaron Gilmore does not accept this, but the 70 million that's projected is probably a figment of somebody's imagination. It's a very rough way of doing it, but it's become a driving force for this government in bringing this clause into this bill at this time. And therefore it stretches credibility, certainly mine, and that is in the regulatory impact statement. So in the end, Mr. Speaker, one has to wonder, why is the government doing it? Is the government now simply taking another step in advantaging those who are well off, and making sure they get another tax break? And they've had several already, and this is another one that makes it possible for them to have that ability available to them. I thought Stuart Nash was very astute in saying that one of the perverse effects of this could be those who will now transfer huge sums of their resources into trust, etc. And it will heighten avoidance behaviour, or maybe of the type that we have not seen. So it is a rushed decision, and for all of those kinds of reasons, despite the fact that we support every other clause in this particular bill, this has been the pivotal clause for us, and it actually, the government is not prepared to wait for the report on all of this to be ready so that a more considered decision can be made, but it's actually taking... I wish it would listen to what Warren Buffett said yesterday. Do charge me tax fairly, and maybe members on that side might need to think about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, this debate is concluded. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. No. The ayes have it. Aye. Ayes have it. Party vote, please, Mr. Speaker. Party vote's called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
57 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
42 votes opposed.
Green Party.
9 votes opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
5 votes in favour.
Maori Party.
Tokotoro e tautuku ana.
Progressive.
1 vote opposed.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Mana. The Honourable Chris Carter.
1 vote opposed.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 66, the noes are 53. The motion is agreed to.
Taxation, Tax Administration and Remedial Matters Bill, third reading.
Call on Government Order of the Day number 6.
Duties of